Om Agyantamrandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakchumilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namahum Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srilasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Now, I think the topic was going to be how we met Prabhupada. Is that right? Okay. For myself, the meeting began in September of 1966. And it was not a personal face-to-face type of meeting at that point. It was the result of a letter from two dear friends who had left Portland, Oregon, and traveled to New York City. And while in New York City, these two friends, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, the lady was named Jan, and the young man was named Mike. And Mike was a musician. And his idea was to go to New York and, hit the big time, maybe. He was quite good. And they drove out. So after, sometime we get a letter that they're there, and he's already got some, what we call gigs. It means playing with some groups, for the public. And then we got another letter after some time. There was, a few in between, but then we got a letter, and it mentioned in that letter that they met a Swami. It didn't give too many details. Just I'm fixing a light thing here. Didn't give too many details. So, and I was thinking, met a Swami. We'd met a few Swamis and we hadn't been too impressed. But my boyfriend, whose name was Sam, he was like, we have to get a teacher. We need a guru. And in my typical stupid American woman mindset, I said, well, if you want a guru, if you want a teacher, you go ahead. But I don't want anybody telling me what to do with my life. I want to make my own mistakes. So you can see how enlightened I wasn't. And just a second, I'm going to put Jai Shri on. Here, let's see, just arrange it so it looks okay for you, and then you can join there, okay? So you're going to see my name again, but it will really be Jai Shri. I guess I'm not wearing a mask. So then we get another letter. And this time they said they were going to get married. And that was a little shocking to us because in that culture that we were involved in, the hippie culture, we didn't believe marriage was necessary. In fact, we were quite adamant that it wasn't necessary. So that was a little surprising. And actually, Mike was not so much a hippie in that he didn't do a lot of the stuff hippies did. And he was a very thoughtful person also. So again, oh wait, I gotta turn. I'm gonna get my voice double. How do we do this? We turn it off. Okay, is it off? Is it off now? I think so. Okay, so then when you speak, we'll turn it on.
No problem.
So now there's like maybe we're just gonna have to use the one screen.
Yeah.
All right. So Jan had a sister named Joan. And there we go. So oh, it's still doing it. I had this problem before that I could not get out of the Zoom. Okay, where does it say? Leave. All right. Sorry about that. You can scoot over. So Joan decided she would go to New York and assist her sister in the marriage. And she did that. And her sister's name was Joan, as I mentioned. And she knew nothing about what was going on. So she shows up and all these devotees are sitting around on the floor, or would-be devotees, soon-to-be devotees. This was at 26 2nd Avenue in New York City. And they were sitting on the floor and they were eating. And, you know, like with their hands and fingers, which, okay, you know that, but for us, that was a little different. Although we liked it because we liked to do anything that was against our upbringing. And in our upbringing, you absolutely did not ever eat with your fingers. You could get your hands slapped for doing that. So, you know, we liked it, you know. You want to know something else we liked? When we found out about not using toilet paper, we thought that was really radical. Anyway, so they're in there and they're eating from the floor, and she's looking at that, and they give her something, you know, and she was trying to eat it. At that time, both Joan and myself were on a really radical diet, macrobiotic diet. And there's different levels, and we were at the highest level, number 7. Number 7 diet meant only brown rice. Definitely wasn't a cottage-friendly diet. No fruit, no potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants. I mean, just brown rice. But of course, we would every once in a while go out and break the regulative principle of the macrobiotic diet because it was just so boring. And we'd sneak some French fries or a bacon, you know, eggplant or something. So then she eats, and then Prabhupada offers her a round or a brown ball full of, and he says, put your hand out. And she puts her hand out, and he puts this round, sticky, drippy, gooey ball. The ball was firm, but the liquid sugar water. And she's thinking, oh, I'm not going to eat this. And she was, oh, no, I can't possibly. Yes, eat. So she did it reluctantly, but in her mind, she's thinking, I'll never eat with these people again, you know. So like the next day, she goes up to assist for the wedding. And she's wearing a mini skirt, like really short, and a tank top, you know. And she knocks on the door and he goes, you know, I came to assist for my sister's wedding. And he looks at her, he goes, he gave no indication anything was strange. He goes, okay, wash your hands and rinse out your mouth. And she did that. So she's helping him prepare. And he says, so you can make some dough? And because she actually was already a good cook, she starts saying a bris dough, or there's different types of doughs in Western cooking. So she's naming off these doughs, and he's looking at her like, and he goes, any 5-year-old boy in India knows how to make dough. And she's still confused. He goes, earlobe soft. She goes, what should the texture be? And he goes, earlobe soft. And she did that. And then she goes, Swamiji, can I have a drink of water? And he goes, step outside. And then when you're finished, rinse out your mouth and wash your hands. They're going on and on again. Swamiji, can I smoke a cigarette? He goes, go outside. Like before, I just outside the room, the kitchen, but this is like, go outside. And then when you come back, rinse out your mouth and wash your hands. Can you imagine how tolerant he was and what he had to face in meeting all of us, you know? So they'd already gotten initiated. So this was the marriage ceremony, first one in ISKCON. Janaki was the first lady devotee first in ISKCON, and the first one to wear a sari. In fact, that sari was the only sari in ISKCON for a while. Of course, ISKCON wasn't even, we weren't even ISKCON yet. You know, I wore that sari for my marriage. And at least 3 others, Krishna Devi, Nandarani, one other person, we all wore that sari because it was the only one. It was a nice one. Mukunda had purchased it, silk with a red silk with a little gold border. So anyways, they decided they would be going to India. They had that idea. In the meantime, myself and Sam, my boyfriend, we were up on the top of a mountain, in a really tall, big mountain, almost 6,000 feet up. And we were up there as employees of the government. He was the employee. I was the housekeeper and the cook, looking for forest fires. Vast area of wilderness. The nearest little town was called Sisters. And the mountains, there were 3 of them, in fact. We were on the tallest one. They were called the 3 Sisters. And we had to stay up there until the end of the fire season. And the end of the fire season would be typified by when the snow first fell, that would be no more danger of fire. So, you know, it seemed like we'd be there for a while. And one day we had a day off. And there's really no place to go. So we just drove to one of the other mountains and camped for the night. And when we came back to our mountain, we saw a car with New York license plates, a small car. And we're kind of wondering because nobody would come up there. First of all, the road was like very one-car road, dirt road on the side of a mountain. And you know, it was mostly the forest rangers or the fire lookouts would be on that road. So we lived in a small wooden cabin. There was no bathroom. There was a sort of a sink, a place you could pour water. But if you wanted water, you would go outside to a stream that was a few yards away. And the water was so pure and so clear, you could just drink it immediately. You use that water to bathe. We had a little stove that went by wood. You could heat up the water, and then you'd step outside. And if you were an American Sankirtan devotee, that was quite normal to take a bath, like take a gallon of water in a plastic gallon thing and throw the water. So, I mean, anyways, simple situation. We opened the door and there's our friends, Mike, Jan, and Joan. But then we started finding out some interesting things. First of all, we were thinking, you know, when a guest comes, you have to offer them the best thing you have, isn't it? You know, but they'd already made themselves at home, so to speak. So then we thought, well, what's the best thing we have? And we offered to them, would you like some LSD? And to our surprise, they said no. So we're like, wow. First they meet a Swami, then they get married. What's next? Well, what was next was they told us they had new names. That Mike was now Mukunda and Jan was now Janaki. So, okay, they're married, they have new names. And by the way, they're vegetarian. Now, when we came into the cabin, Janaki was already cooking something. And it was really fascinating because she'd make these, there was some kind of a dough. She'd make some little balls, flatten them out because I didn't have a rolling pin, but she managed to get them flat, put them on the fire, on the top of the stove, and then on the fire part, and they puffed up. So, of course, that was chapatis. But having never seen a chapati before, it was so fascinating, you know. And then, so, okay, Menta Swami got married, got new names, vegetarian. That was very unusual in those days, by the way. I mean, honestly, in the 60s, if you were a vegetarian, it was almost like being a communist. Seriously, it was like not looked upon very well. So then during the dinner, Mukunda said, after dinner, I want to show you these books from Swami. And what he showed us, of course, were the first volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 parts. And it was so, like looking at that cover was so fascinating because at this point, there was not any access to Eastern philosophical literature. The only books we had were called Tibetan Book of the Dead and I Ching. I don't even know if you know what the I Ching is.
Urantia book.
Huh?
The Urantia book.
The what?
Urantia book? You
No.
didn't know that one?
No, just those two, you know. And so, so here was this, but those books, like, they were more like speculations, you know. Here was something that was really looking impressive because of having the, did I just knock you off? Okay. Having the what I found out was Sanskrit and the word by word, the translation, and then the purports. And I'm looking at this, I mean, literally it was with wonder in my eyes. But the most fascinating part was the cover, where there was this a guy with blue skin and 4 arms lying on a snake who was in a big ocean. And out of the belly of that guy was a flower, a big stem with a flower. And on top of the flower was a fellow with 4 heads and blue skin. And I, who is this? And Mukunda very soberly said, this is God. And I'm telling you, I immediately accepted that because although up until that point, I didn't know, I mean, with the hippies, it was always, does God exist? I don't know. You're God, I'm God. We're all God. There is no God. Time magazine in 66 had a cover, black cover with red writing, God is dead. I mean, it was, you know, so that was what we're kind of, you know, but I had experiences beginning as a very young child that I knew I wasn't this body, but I didn't know what I was, who I was, what that meant, but I knew it. Secondly, I'd had outer body experiences. Thirdly, I had experiences where I understood there was something bigger than I was. I just didn't know who or what it was. But if there was a God, he had to be different than us. And 4 arms, blue skin was definitely different. So I just accepted that. And then in the book, I kept seeing this phrase, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that was also fascinating. God is supreme and he's a supreme person. This was my introduction to Srila Prabhupada. And because of that, I wanted to meet this Swami, you know, to be continued. Do I want to get Gore? Because they have another class after this, so we have to move along. These are serious devotees.
You have to continue. You have to continue.
Okay. So then they told us they're going to San Francisco to start a temple. And I made my very first inquiry. My question was, what is a temple? And Mukunda says, it's a store, and very serious, I was serious. What is a temple? It's a storefront painted white. Because we'd get to storefront, first thing you did, paint them white, so that was like New York. And he said, we're going down to San Francisco. We're going to start a temple. Why don't you come with us? Well, we couldn't just walk out. We were on a contract, a government contract. We said, yeah, as soon as the first snowfall, we'll come on down. So we all go to bed that night. The next morning, call of nature, which meant you had to go outside, And I opened the door and there was snow on the ground. And right in front of our door was a mountain lion footprints, So I had we had these kind of thing, you'd ring it, and it would like a walkie-talkie kind of thing, similar to that. It went down 6,000 feet to the town below, this little tiny town. And it was called Sisters, I mentioned that. And called the ranger, say, okay, we're leaving. What do you mean you're leaving? Well, it snowed. We're leaving. And the guy says, it didn't snow down here. And I said, well, it snowed up here. And then he goes, it won't stay. And by then I had the contract out. It just said first snow. It didn't say, anything more. So he said, it won't stay. And I says, well, it doesn't say it has to stay. It just says first snow. And there's snow out there, but there's no snow down here, which I found out later, happens. So, in tall mountains, the top of the mountains will get the snow, but down below, it won't get the snow. Even in New Vrindavan, it's happened, where my cabin is. I've had snow up here, and then I go down to the temple and nothing's happening. So you can imagine on a, grander scale. But that was it. We were going. And there was a few odds and ends. I had a couple horses and a couple of chickens and a couple of cats, a couple of dogs.
Up there?
Yeah, I borrowed. And so I had to take those. I took the horses back. I took the chickens back, took one of the cats and one of the dogs back, and then one of the cats and one of the dog, the little dog that you see in the Prabhupada's arrival in San Francisco, 67. If you Google Prabhupada's arrival in San Francisco, 67, you'll see this little dog, and that's Ralph. That was our little dog. And he had some interesting interactions with Prabhupada, but no time for that now. So we did go down to San Francisco, and it so happened, I had lived there before getting up to Oregon. And how I got to Oregon was a little bit strange, that I was living in a ghost town. And a ghost town means it's uninhabited. It was a former logging town, and they had these little cabins, and they would rent them if anybody wanted to live in a ghost town for $25 a month. So I had one of those cabins, but nobody else wanted to live in the ghost town. You had to get your water by a pump. And anyways, so my friends had all gone to Mexico, people I knew. And I got the idea, yeah, I should go to Mexico too. I had no idea what that meant. I'm just going to go to Mexico. So I packed a little bag. I went out on the highway. It was Highway 1 that goes all the way up and down the coast in California. In fact, just last week, a big portion of this Highway 1 fell, huge portion, by a place called Big Sur. Anyways, caved in. So I'm out there like this with my thumb out trying to get a ride, but there wasn't too much traffic, mostly logging trucks. And I had some experience with logging trucks drivers that wasn't so positive. So I didn't, and they weren't going to stop anyway, probably. So I didn't thumb the logging trucks. And I don't know how long I was there, but then this white panel van, cargo van, drove by, and he stops and he goes, hop in. And thing was, I was going to Mexico, and that was south, and this vehicle was heading north. So I didn't say anything right away. And then he goes, well, where are you going? I said, Mexico. And he goes, well, how long have you been there? I didn't know because I didn't have a watch, but it had been a while. So he says, hop in, at least you'll get somewhere. So I hopped in, and that's how I ended up in Portland, Oregon. And the driver became my husband, Shyam Sundar. So talk about an unarranged marriage. Anyway. Yeah, so we were in San Francisco. We found a place to live, started looking for a little storefront to paint white. In the meantime, this is like some unpublished information. Most of the stuff you can read somewhere. This you won't read. So myself and Joan, we decided the Swami's coming and can't take drugs anymore after that. So we're going to take our last LSD trip. And we took this LSD and we're walking all around the Mission District in San Francisco. And it was like time to go back to our place. As we were walking along the street, a great, big, huge German Shepherd bounds down the stairs and it was ruff, 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 and he had a big mouth and he was loud. And, I wasn't exactly scared, but it was like, what's going on? And then some tall guy with some kind of robe on, he started going, "Que tal, que tal?" So in Spanish, "que tal" means what? I was thinking, what's he talking about? But it turned out that was the name of the dog. And the dog came back. And then he says to me and Joan, "So would you like to come in?" And I'm like, no, thank you. Because I mean, unlike a lot of hippies, I was kind of a clean freak. I didn't like dirty, messy places. So I was just imagining just like seeing that guy and that dog with a dirt, I didn't want to be in there. And to my great surprise, Joan went in. So I went home alone. Ralph was there. And she didn't get back until the next day. And she came back with Kate Tall, the dog, and this fellow named Roger. So this Joan became Jamuna and this Roger became, Guru Das. But they decided, they decided to go off together for a little while. And she took the Bhagavatam set with the 3 volumes, and she started reading these books. And it was during that time and reading those books that she became convinced to follow Srila Prabhupada. In the meantime, we had gotten initiated. And first time, though, backtrack a little bit to the airport. There was, nowadays they talk about strategic planning. If you're in business, you've heard strategic planning. Well, we didn't use that word, but we did have a strategic plan. We were there, we were looking for a place. We knew the Swami would come if we got a place, but we wanted to, as they say, drum up interest, get some business, So we printed flyers and we started passing them out. And it just said, "Swamiji is coming. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. No more down." The no more coming down kind of appealed to the hippies because, you would take some kind of a drug, you'd get quote unquote high, and then you'd crash land, come down. So we're saying, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Get high forever, no more coming down, But there was no address and no date because we had none. So then the next flyer came out, and then we got an address. Swamiji is coming, 518 Frederick Street. Chant Hare Krishna, the whole mantra, stay high forever, no more coming down. But no date, we didn't have that yet. And then the final flyer was, the whole picture was there. Swamiji is coming, 518 Frederick Street, January 17th, So on that day, there was about 50 of us who went to the airport. All kinds of, people. Mukunda had called up news people, news presses, and whatever people we had already interacted with. Some of them came to the airport. This so-called poet, Allen Ginsberg, who had been to India, he even had a harmonium and he knew how to chant. And, he was he lent some support early on in New York, and he happened to be in San Francisco at the time, and so he also came. So my memory of the airport was standing there, noticing everybody. Ralphie was there, wagging his tail, and the people from the press in those days had great big box cameras with big flashes on them. And we're looking at every plane coming like, is this the plane? Is this the plane? I think it was American Airlines that he flew American Airlines. Historically, this was the first trip on a plane by Srila Prabhupada from New York to San Francisco, because you know how he got to America and it wasn't on a plane. So first time on a plane. Now I started thinking like, okay, he's a Swami. And we did not know what did it mean, Swami, but something mystical. And I started thinking, gosh, we probably didn't even need to send him a ticket. He probably could have just, arrived on his own, like however Swamis move around the ether or whatever. I remember thinking like that, totally foolishly, of course. But, and then of course he was going to be really big because Swamis were really big. At least that's what we thought. And then finally, the plane carrying the Swami landed. People were coming out. I'm like, where is he? Where is he? And then finally, there was some kind of like brightness. So I can say at that point, brightness was coming. And it got brighter and brighter. And there was not a very large person at all. And it was so bright, I couldn't see. And I thought it was because of the flash bulbs from the cameras. But then I realized, oh, but they're behind me, that it was this personality. And the other thing I realized was I was on the floor. What was I doing on the floor? Because at that point, nobody knew about obeisances. Other devotees have described this. I think Satchidananda Maharaj describes in his Japa book, his first meeting with Prabhupada, same thing happened to him. I know other people.
Could happen to me too.
Huh?
Happened to me too.
Happened to Jayashree too. You were just knocked off your feet. But what I, in contemplation of it, later I could understand, we were so covered with the mode of ignorance. Darkness around, all untraced, make me a miracle, your divine grace. That his beautiful presence just knocked away some of that darkness for a moment. And that collision with the vibrancy and purity of the pure devotee, it was like a collision, and it just knocked us on our feet. The spiritual. So I'm on the ground and I'm trying to figure out, how did I get on the ground? What this person actually, he's not very big at all. And he's wearing white plastic pointy-toed shoes. We'd never seen anything like that before. And right behind him was little Ralph wagging his tail. And I remember thinking, dog is smarter than I am. He's on his feet. I remember getting up and we all start to follow him, which was like appropriate, except he'd never been there before. So how would he know where to go? But we didn't think of that. We just followed him, and that was a little mystical. And we had one devotee had come from New York, Harvey Cohen. He was an artist. And he had a black Cadillac. So that car was there to pick up, because our car, first he walked to our car, and our car was a 54 Ford. And we'd taken a what do you call when you make a spray, like what's it called? You cut out
Decal?
Well, we had we'd cut out the Hare Krishna mantra on a piece of paper, cardboard, and then we would spray that, all over the car. So it wasn't so hard to figure out which car was ours because of that mantra. Anyways, but then it was, no, you go in that car. And we all went to the little storefront painted white on 518 Frederick Street. And the place was packed. And of course, it wasn't such a huge place. So to say it was packed, we're not talking, hundreds of thousands of people. but it's definitely was more than 100 in there, and it was body to body packed. And at that point, we were like men and women all together. There was no distinction, separation. And there were not just hippies, but people with suits and ties, students, different types of people were, it was quite an array. Of course, a good number of the hippies. And the interesting thing about the hippies is that they like to dress up as famous personalities. So there was a few Jesus Christ, there was a few Geronimo was a very famous Apache Indian. There were a few Geronimos, there was like some Vikings, Cleopatra. I mean, whatever they wanted to be for the day, they would be that person, they thought, And there was a pungent aroma of incense and patchouli oil because the hippies didn't always have access to bathing facilities. So they would use this essential oil called patchouli very liberally over their body, which would exude a fragrance really strong, So the place was colorful, it was full of fragrance. And we had constructed a little, what we called the dais. We didn't know the word Vyasa sign. So it was like, a raised platform, small raised platform with a pillow that we had. Not we, one person said, well, that's going to be uncomfortable sitting on that wood. And he ran out looking in the street because people would throw a lot of stuff on the street in those days. And he found a thrown away couch and he took the pillow from that couch. God knows what went on in that couch, but that was the pillow, And then there was a Muslim prayer mat tacked on the wall behind. And that was from Shamsunder. He had been formerly, he had been in Morocco learning some herbal arts, making hashish, and so he had brought this back, this prayer mat, and so he put that on the wall behind, and there was a picture of Vishnu, a really big one, like 4x4, because while we were painting the temple, this guy came and he goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I remember saying, "Well, we're painting, this is going to be a temple." And he goes, "Oh, I just came back from India and I'm an artist, so I'll paint you a picture." Okay. And he comes with this, second time now I'm seeing a guy with blue-eyed forearms, but he took a little artistic license. And this Vishnu was blowing out of a volcano. But we didn't know anything about parampara and, that kind of thing. So we put it on the wall. So that was the extent of the walls were white, and Vishnu was coming out of a volcano, and there was a Muslim prayer mat. So Prabhupada, he looked, he sat down and began a small kirtan, and people joined in. And, the hippies, they were, for the most part, really sincerely looking for something more in life. They were looking for truth. And most of all, they were looking for love. So just like we say Hare Krishna, they were looking for love and they were looking for peace because of this horrible war that was going on. So we say Hare Krishna, they'd go like this: peace and love, brother, peace and love, sister, which was the way they would greet. So, here were the peace and love people. And what does this new Swami say? He goes, there is no love in the material world. Now that could have been what we would call in those days a downer. In other words, something depressing. But he quickly began to describe the source of love. And of course, that source was Krishna. And he explained the quality of pure, true love. And as he was speaking, we were feeling, coming from him, we were feeling loved. And we were feeling ourselves falling in love with him. After that talk, there was a second kirtan, and it was more enthusiastic. And then after that kirtan, somebody brought in a plate of cut up apples and oranges. And piece by piece, Prabhupada was passing out to everybody's outstretched hands this little piece of prasadam, this little piece of fruit that was immensely satisfying. Nowadays we say prasadam, we're thinking pile of halava and this and that, big pile of plate. Just a little piece of fruit from the lotus hands of the pure devotee was so wonderfully satisfying. And that was my first meeting with Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
You situate yourself.
How long do I have?
1
1 minute.
15 minutes. How long do we have to stop right at 7:30 because you have the other class?
Maybe 5 minutes here and there, Malati Prabhu. 7:35 is okay.
Okay.
Okay, hello, Hare Krishna, everybody.
This is Jai Shri Devi Dasi, and
Yeah.
she's been at New Vrindavan for how many years?
39 years.
39 years. And she's a person you can call mother, and it really means mother. She has 3 sons, and she had a beautiful little daughter that left her body before she could grow up.
Left on Prabhupada's appearance day. She was, I'm sure everyone thought the same thing. She was definitely an advanced devotee. There was 3 articles written about her in the back of Godhead magazine. Yes, she was a very special soul.
Radha Govinda.
Radha Govinda. She was born on Valentine's Day and left on Prabhupada's appearance day at the temple in Detroit.
Wow.
Yeah, her whole life was very special, actually. So, how I met Srila Prabhupada. We'll do the summary, the summary study. So I'm from Hawaii. My father was a manager of Dun and Bradstreet. We had a house overlooking the ocean, a new Cadillac every year. I drove a sports car when I was young. But there was something missing in life. The American lifestyle leaves a lot to be desired. It's very shallow. So I started when I was like around college age, I guess 18. I started desiring to find God. And it just so happens the girl across the street went on a spiritual pilgrimage to San Francisco. And somehow or other, it just fueled my fire. So it just so happens I had a boyfriend, my first boyfriend, basically. And he lived at a house in town. He was older than me a little bit. And he had a bunch of friends, and they were all hippies. And I had started college. And somehow or other, he convinced me to take some
Intoxication.
That I never took any intoxication when I was in high school. I never smoked, I never drank. I was really good. My father was very strict. I was really a good following daughter. But somehow or other, they were into kind of far out things. So I did that, and then I left home with him and broke my father's heart. And I just couldn't stay. I came back home. But my father was not happy with me coming back home because of in Hawaii, they call it pakalolo. It's marijuana. So I had to move out. I moved into town. Anyway, that person that was my first boyfriend got initiated by Prabhupada many years later. His name was Mahendra. And anyway, Krishna put me in the association of devotees. The house that he lived at had people that also became very devotional. But I just wasn't ready for it. And there was no Krishna consciousness at the time. So I went on a journey for a number of years, maybe 2, 3, probably 1.5 or 2. But because I was looking for God, he was revealing himself in different ways. I moved to San Francisco, and I went to a butcher shop. And then all of a sudden, I had a very heavy realization that these dead animals were actually dead animals, not food. They had been killed unkindly. And so I said at that point, no, I won't eat meat anymore. So I didn't eat meat. And then I went back to Hawaii, and the same thing happened with intoxication. Okay, no intoxication. But I had a family I was babysitting for. And I went over to one of the other islands with someone who was living at their house. And so he would work and I would just meditate, whatever meditation was. There was no Krishna consciousness. And I kept hearing a voice that I had to go back to that island, Oahu, and meet with that same fellow that I left home with. And I heard it so many times. I told Mel, I said, I have to go back to Oahu and I have to go. So I went and I flew over to Oahu. I hitchhiked out to the country. Bill Stimple lived in the middle of a cane field. I went, I knocked on his door. He opened his door. He said, what are you doing here? I said, I don't know, but I kept hearing a voice that I had to come and see you. He said, well, I have a girlfriend. He said, but you can stay for a night or two. And they had a little temple room because his friend, Ronnie Lamb, had gone to India. But well, I don't know what the temple room was about. It had madrasas and stuff like that. So he found a place for me to live down the road with this older woman. She was like 40. I was probably 19 at the time. So I moved in with this woman and I would work. And by then I was already following all the regulated principles. Just I'd get a realization and I would, oh yeah, this is right. So I was already like following all these different principles just myself. But I would go to work, I would come home and I would read a Bible or Bhagavad Gita by Swami Chinmayananda or Buddha's teachings. And I was really trying to find God at that point. And I was becoming very, very bewildered. So I lay down in my room and I prayed to God, my dear Lord, if you're here, please send me to somebody who knows you. And so a few days later, I called a friend and I said, I have to have an almond cookie. I was out in the country. I didn't have a car. I would hitchhike to work, very simple lifestyle. And he took me to the bakery in Sunset Beach, and it was a very small bakery. But on the bakery window, when I went inside to get my almond cookie, was a little poster. And it had a man in a graveyard contemplating life and some ghosts flying around. And it said, chant while you can. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And so it said, Swami, so and so. And right before that, this lady I was living with got a poster in the mail. And she opened it up and it was a blue boy on a rock with a lamb and a calf. And it was a letter from her son saying, Mom, I've just been initiated. My name is Muni Bunda. Chant Hare Krishna. Of course, we had no idea what that meant. So when I saw this poster on the bakery window, I said to my friend, take me there. So he drove me to the address, and it was an old Hawaiian house up on a hill. And it had some windmill and some cows. So we drove up this dirt driveway. And when we got near the top, I felt very apprehensive, scared, but not scary scared. And I turned around and looked up, and there was an older gentleman in saffron telling us to come up. So I grabbed my apple juice and we went up the stairs. And in the foyer was some saffron cloth. We walked through this one room that had a wire across it and a cloth over it. That was the temple room with a curtain, so-called makeshift curtain. And we went into this other room and there was a desk that was a piece of plywood and it had some bricks underneath it. And Srila Prabhupada sat down behind the desk and started talking about God. And I had gotten to the point where I had so many questions. What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do? What's it all about? What am I supposed to eat? What's going on? What am I doing? What am I here for? And Srila Prabhupada answered all of my questions. I could see him looking into me. He was looking into my mind. He was looking into my heart. And I could see Jesus right next to Srila Prabhupada. And I could see that they were the same kind of person and they had the same love for me, different than I had ever experienced. And I knew who he was. I knew he was God's representative. It was very obvious. And I also offered my obeisances just out of just natural respect, although I never offered obeisances to anyone. Prabhupada it was just who he was. It was just everything surrounding him was perfect. He was like your best friend that you've been looking for. The hippies used to have a saying, where it's at. You have some fool telling you where it's at. This is where it's at, man. And it was all like fluff, just useless. But when Prabhupada started talking, it was like volumes of information came into your soul and you could just see. It's like you try and figure it out. Well, what on earth is that? Is it a J? Who is God? What are we doing here? And Prabhupada comes along and he goes, so now you see? I was like, yes, that's what Jesus meant. That's what the Bible meant. That's what this story was about. That's why all these different religions, Prabhupada explained. It was just like so obvious. They're coming at different times from different sources because Krishna's got a message for those people at that time. And all these different religions do make sense. They have the same story, but told in a different way on a different level. Everything just fell into place. So the devotees were gone. That was the first time that they'd ever left Prabhupada alone. So Krishna kindly let me in the back door.
How do you say the Bhagavad Gita?
Oh, so I was going back there every day. He was only there for a few more days. And the devotees, when they came back, were surprised to see us there. But so I went back another time and Prabhupada told me to bring my Bhagavad Gita. I was reading an impersonal Bhagavad Gita, which I was preaching also. But his conclusion was, you are all God. And it was like, well, yeah, you can see you're part of God. And in that way, you're all God because you're part and parcel of God. But his conclusion was, I couldn't reach it. So Prabhupada had me bring my Bhagavad Gita and had me sit down. And he opened the Bhagavad Gita and he started going through it. And he showed me, he said, do you see what he's done? And he said, he's taken Krishna's words and in his purport, he told just the opposite. Krishna said this and he said that. He said, so what is the use of, he said, these are Krishna's words. He said, and then he pulled out his Bhagavad Gita as it is. It was a small, that was a Macmillan, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a small Macmillan lavender.
Bleach. It was light blue.
It was lilac.
It was a light blue.
Mine was lilac. Anyway, it was a summarized version. So Prabhupada said that here's Bhagavad Gita as it is, what Krishna said, what Krishna meant. And, coming from the hippie culture, although I was working and I had like 5 or 6 checks that I'd never cashed because I didn't have any interest and nothing to do with the money anyway. Everything was free. Love, everything is free. And so he said, would you like a copy? And I said, yes. And then he sat back and he said, that will be $2.95. And I was surprised because I thought he was going to give it to me. And then, but because it was him and because he was saying it, all these volumes of knowledge went through my brain. Yeah, of course, it's a book. You have to print it. It costs money. I said, yes, I'll take 3 of them. So I bought 3 Bhagavad Gitas and I gave them I passed him out. Rameshwar pointed out, he said, oh, you became a book distributor immediately.
Yeah.
But I went back he was only there for a few days. I would find my way out. I was taking people. We had a kirtan one time. He sat on the dais. What time am I finished now?
In 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes,
It was
4
the
minutes, 5
first time I heard the chanting, and Prabhupada sat there with these big kartals, ching, 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 ching. And he started chanting Hare Krishna. And I didn't know what he was saying, but I was trying to understand it. And somehow or other that stayed so deep inside of me that all the next few days when I was working, I was chanting and chanting. I couldn't stop chanting. I was like the story of the fisherman and Lord Chaitanya. He touches the body of Lord Chaitanya and then he's chanting like a madman. So I was chanting, and Govinda Dasi's iron broke. So she asked me if I would take Prabhupada's clothes home and iron them for his trip. So of course I did. I took him home and I washed him in this big cement basin. And I was getting high from washing Prabhupada's clothes. Prabhupada's clothes were so fragrant and so spiritually surcharged that it was just an incredible experience. And then I hung them up and then I ironed them, and the ends were just like ripped cloth on the ends. They were full of holes, like incense holes, but they were so fragrant. So I brought them back. I mean, there was a little more to the story, but I ended up moving into the temple a few weeks later by Govinda Dasi's mercy. And then they got me some sandalwood. Balabhadra had moved in the week or the month before. I moved in the next month. Turiya Das came the next month. And they gave me some sandalwood beads that I strung, sent them to Prabhupada in a little box covered with a paper bag. And a week or so later, the box came back, same box, same paper bag, turned inside out with the return address. And it was a letter from Srila Prabhupada and my initiating beads.
Wow.
And he gave me my name. Your name is Jai Shri. It means victory. So always be victorious. I have the letter. I have a copy of it. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Which year was that, Mother Jayashree? Which year was that? Which year did you meet
Like
Prabhupada?
March 1969.
69. You met Prabhupada first time in 1969. Then you
Yeah,
got. Oh,
yeah.
wonderful. Really inspiring. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mother Jayashree.
It just shows how Krishna works. You know, from being on one island, hearing a voice telling me several times to go, just so happens the person I went to see, he had me stay at this woman's house who just happened to be the mother of a devotee. I mean, there was no Hare Krishna there at the time. So it's just all, Krishna works in his own wonderful way. I'm
Haribol.
merciful, causeless mercy.
Yeah.
So next week, Gaur, are you there?
I think Gaur Shakti Prabhu left. I think he left in. Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, we can continue next week, and I can describe my initiation ceremony, which was a little unusual.
With the margarine.
Oh, that was. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Malati Prabhu and Mother Jayashree. It's really inspiring and enlivening. Thank you so much. And devotees, I hate to stop this right now. I really wanted to hear more and more, but we have another session coming up. So we have another Bhagavad Gita reading session at this time. So, but please join us next week again from 6:30 to 7:30. So we are hoping to continue this every week. Every Monday, hoping Mother Malati is going to be available. So we will have this next week, and every Monday we will try to have this katha so that we could hear more about glories of Srila Prabhupada and the disciples. So thank you all once again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Malati Prabhu.
Hare Haribol. Hare Krishna. Hare